today we're going to be going over the 2020 NFL Draft, which is the famous Joe Burrow draft, where he went number one, and just going over it, comparing it a little bit to 2004, and then also going over some of Brady's comments about quarterbacks, and then some potential MVP dark horse candidates from NFL.com.
Yeah, let's go over it. So we'll go over the top 10 picks in this draft. I'll ask you whether or not these players are bust or if it's too early to call at this point. We'll start with Joey B himself. First overall pick. How did he turn out?
I mean, he's been to a Super Bowl so far. However, the injuries at this point do worry me a little bit. So give it a few more years. But as of right now, I don't think Joe Burrow is a bust, and I would still take him over any other quarterback in this draft. So I think he's lived up to expectations. Just got to stay healthy, man.
Yeah, just got to stay healthy. Got to get on that TB12 diet. Number 2, Chase Young, who is now, I don't even remember where he signed at this point.
Yeah, Chase Young was on the San Francisco 49ers. I don't believe they brought him back. He just reminds me a lot of the guy that the Texans took, who bounced around everywhere as well.
Jadeveon Clowney.
Yeah, who's still bouncing around. So I think he is just another Jadeveon Clowney, and I think he's a bust. What do you think?
I think he's an anomaly at this point because
He had a great year.
he had his great first rookie season, and then something happened. I don't know if it was the dysfunction of Washington or whatnot, but
The sewage leaks.
the sewage leaks could hurt anybody, or maybe one of those bleachers fell on him or something. I don't know. But then he goes to San Francisco and doesn't do a whole lot there either. And then I just remembered that he had signed with the Saints this past year, so he's already accumulating teams like Infinity Stones. He's a bust.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yep. And then on to number 3, Jeff Okudah.
Yeah, if he was taken lower in the draft, maybe low first round, I wouldn't think he was a bust, but there are better corners in this draft than Jeff Okudah. Like, we have AJ Terrell there at number 16. Think about how much different the Lions secondary could be with AJ Terrell. So since there is a better player taken above him, I would say he's a bust, but still a fine NFL player. He's not a star, but he's fine.
Yeah, and I think this next player is another example of that. What do the New York Giants not do well?
Draft tackles.
Well, number 4, they take Andrew Thomas.
I mean, first of all, who is their quarterback in this draft?
Daniel Jones.
Why, if you're the New York Giants, would you be like, Daniel Jones is in our locker room? You know what we need to fix this child of Jim Carrey and Walt Jr.? Another tackle. Instead of, maybe instead of that, we should draft another quarterback, where we had tank for Tua there still. And then we also had Justin Herbert there still. We also had Jalen Hurts, who you could have taken instead of letting him go to Philadelphia, or Jordan Love. But instead, you take a tackle who ended up being a bust because you're the New York Giants and you suck at life.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, of their offensive linemen of the past few years, like, he's better than Evan Neal. I'll defend him there, but still, with other players that are taken later on, I don't love it. But number 5, Miami takes Tua Tagovailoa.
Bust. At number 5?
He's not a bust.
Yes, he is. He was taken at 5 when the entire narrative that year was, oh my God, tank for Tua. You really want to tank for a guy with no arm strength who can't play in cold weather, beat teams with a winning record, and win a playoff game. The dude has acquired more concussions than playoff games. And then you had Justin Herbert right there. How much better would the Dolphins be with Justin Herbert? You had Jalen Hurts. How much better would the Dolphins be with Jalen Hurts? And then also Jordan Love, who I think is better than Tua at this point in his career, who, I don't know, has won a playoff game. No, Tua's a bust. There was an entire headline that said tank for Tua. And you haven't won a playoff game when you have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and we have to hear, the most explosive offense in the league. Like, really? I haven't seen it in December or January. Where's it at?
Well, they have the fastest receiver core in the league.
Yeah. And he
Well,
can't get them the ball.
he was an MVP candidate.
He was, yeah, when it should have been Tyreek Hill.
Well, the comments can decide how Tua fared in his NFL career. But another narrative that we can speak about here, Justin Herbert was taken immediately after at number 6 and immediately stepped in and had one of the best rookie seasons of all time. Justin Herbert, is he a bust?
No, he's a Chargers quarterback, and he was taken by the Chargers, and he's been a Chargers quarterback. So honestly, Justin Herbert was better than I thought he was going to be, and he's been everything that the Chargers culture has been about, where he puts up gaudy numbers. Sometimes he gives you a glimmer of hope, and then when you need him most, he disappears, which is exactly the Chargers motto. So Justin Herbert has fit right in for that team.
It is unfortunate. Can he change the narrative this upcoming season with a new head coach? He has had bad head coaches. We shall see. I do think it's interesting to think about if Tua and Herbert switched roles, where he'd be throwing to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Mike Gesicki, Devon A-Train, how much better that team would be. I do think that if they switch roles, Tua might be considered maybe not as good as he is now, because he would have had Anthony Lynn and Brandon Staley as their head coach, which isn't quite the same as Mike McDaniels.
No, Tua would be out of the league right now if he was on the Chargers. Tua would have Jared Goff numbers with Jeff Fisher if he went to the Chargers. I mean, Justin Herbert on the Dolphins, I think we would have won a playoff game right now, and I think the Dolphins would definitely have won the division over the Bills by now. Like, the fact that you started that hot, had that much of a lead over the Bills, where the Bills were 5-6 at one point, and you lost the division. I mean, Justin Herbert doesn't have the dog in him, but there's not really any dogs on the Chargers offense.
Yes.
However, Miami has a dog for a head coach, and you have Tyreek Hill there, so he doesn't really need to be that, and we've seen that with Tua being in the MVP conversation. Hell, I think Justin Herbert probably would be an MVP if he was on the Dolphins at this point, and I'm not a Justin Herbert fan.
Yeah, I agree. I think Justin Herbert on Miami, they're a much better team. I think a much more legit threat for the Bengals, the Ravens, and the Chiefs, respectively. But other players that were taken shortly after, number 7, Carolina selected Derek Brown, who is a Pro Bowler, has been pretty good for them.
Yeah, I'm sorry you went to Carolina.
Yeah, me too. You turned out okay, but you just happened to go to Tepperville. Poor guy.
Yeah, was that before David Tepper, though?
No, this was after.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry, man.
I can't even hate. Like, you've done the most with what you have to work with, which is the worst owner in the league. And I think Sam Darnold was on your team at that point. So I'm also sorry you had to deal with that whole mess of an era.
Hey, Derek Brown, just remember what Frankie Louvu and Brian Burns did. So just know there's hope out there eventually.
They left.
They left. So, make like Jordan Peele's movie and get out. The next episode here, we have Isaiah Simmons with pick number 8 for the Cardinals. And he has been decent. I think he's one of those players, you can't say he's been great. He's been pretty inconsistent, but has he been bad? I mean, what's to say? He's on the Giants this past year. I think usually it's a bad sign when the team that's drafted by you moves on before your rookie deal is over. I think you could say that he's been mediocre.
Yeah, for a top 10 pick, I mean, you're kind of a bust there, but he's a fine NFL rotation player, so give him that.
Well, I can also say that later on in this first round, Patrick Queen comes along. So I think that ultimately, similar to Jeff Okuda, he's kind of in that same class where there's a better player taken in that same round.
And Tua.
Yeah, and Tua. So
Yeah.
we can say that there. And then pick number 9, Jags pick CJ Henderson.
How good's their secondary? It's not great. I mean, he's been pretty good for them. But again, AJ Terrell is there, so
Yeah, exactly. And the same reason why we made fun of Andrew Thomas is because the 10th overall pick turned out to be Jedrick Willis, who was a much better tackle and is a part of the best offensive line in football, arguably.
do you think that's just like with the offensive line? Brady talks about how like the offensive line isn't necessarily about talent, it's about how good Dante Scarnecchia was as a head coach, where everyone knew their blocking assignment and how you can kind of morph as a unit. So do you think that comes with like the benefit of having someone like Kevin Stefanski coaching you instead of having a dysfunctional Giants organization who's never been able to have a good line ever?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, we see teams that historically they draft their offensive linemen and it never meshes. It seems like the Steelers the last several years have been notoriously bad offensive lines. The Giants have had bad offensive lines. The Jets have had bad offensive lines. But then you look at a team like Cleveland who has great head coaching. You have the Chiefs who have a good offensive line, and the list goes on. It seems like these well-run organizations have historically had better offensive lines. So I think there's definitely something to be said there, especially Cleveland in the post Stefanski era, and then obviously the Chiefs continuing on. But as we continue down this list, real quick, I'll breeze through these last few notable names. Pick 11 was Mekhi Becton, who was a tackle.
Yeah, I mean, he went to the Jets. How's their offensive line doing? Probably one of the worst in the league.
Yeah, and 2 picks later, Tristan Wirfs came along, so that did not pan out well. Pick number 12, Henry Ruggs Jr.
Oof, yeah, that was a bust. I mean, that was a tough situation. Henry Ruggs has to live with that situation the rest of his life. I don't need to put salt in anyone's wounds there, but wow, what a tough pick, especially because Justin Jefferson could have been picked. You had T. Higgins in this draft. We had Brandon Ayuk in this draft.
Yeah,
You could have had,
CeeDee Lamb.
yeah, CD Lamb. The great Cole Kmet is in this draft.
Yeah, so I think the Raiders are funny enough had 2 busts in a row. We had Henry Ruggs 12th overall, and then CeeDee Lamb went 17th. And then the very next pick, they drafted a corner, Damian Arnett, who was not on their team anymore. And soon after came um, a number of great players. So I think for them, they whiffed clearly there.